They told me HOA stood for Homeowners Association, not heartless, overbearing aristocrats. But after that afternoon, I started to wonder. The neighborhood promised quiet, matching mailboxes, polite nods, and hedges clipped to the same height. I kept to myself. I kept my Harley under a tarp at the side of my garage, paid the dues, trimmed the lawn, and left people to their lives. The bike was more than a machine. It was the sound of my patience and the proof of my work. The woman everyone called HOA, Karen, ran the association with a crisp email and the ability to make a complaint sound like an artistic critique. Her son Tyler carried that neighborhood authority like a crown. He believed rules applied to other people's discomfort, not to his choices. He had friends who followed him like supporting actors. The first incident happened on a Saturday. I pulled into the drive after a morning ride to settle the carburetor and check the tire pressure. The day smelled of barbecue and sunscreen. There he was, sitting on my bike, phone out and grinning for an audience. He posed like an owner and laughed at the idea anyone could object. "Nice bike," he said. "Thought you'd be too scared to ride here." "It belongs to me," I said. He tried to make it funny by saying his mom would decide who belonged in the neighborhood. Then he fumbled with keys as if ownership were only a matter of confidence. I grabbed his wrist to stop him from turning the ignition. He pushed back. People watched from windows and porches. He ran to his mother's SUV, filmed the scene, and called the police, screaming that I was trying to steal his car. 2 patrol cars arrived, blue lights cutting across the white picket fences. I raised my hands because I had no appetite for a scuffle with the police. The officers separated us and took statements. Tyler and his mother told a practice story. The officer's report called it a dispute and left it for the record. That night, I lay awake thinking about how quickly a small act of entitlement can be dressed up as a crime. I did what practical people do. I gathered proof. I pulled the bike's title, printed maintenance receipts, saved insurance emails, and wrote down names of neighbors who had seen the scene. Paperwork is not thrilling, but it is stubborn. A week later, an HOA block party gave Tyler cover. He drifted toward the bike like it was a prop. I approached and said quietly, "Keep your distance." He smirked, but this time I didn't yell. I told him, "Touch it again, and I'll press trespass charges." I have the evidence. An anonymous email with photos soon landed in the HOA inbox. Him on my bike, timestamps matching my receipts. He posted on social platforms, spinning himself the victim, but the photos and the title were hard to undo. The HOA called a special hearing. At the hearing, Tyler presented bravado, and his mother delivered measured outrage. I spoke last and kept my voice calm. I walked the board through the timeline and handed over documentation. A board member asked me simply how it felt to have someone treat my property like a prop. I said it felt violated and humiliated. The board issued a reprimand, required community service, and demanded a written apology. It was formal and a little cold, but it existed. The officer's notes corroborated enough to give the board confidence. For a while, Tyler kept his distance, and neighbors who once gawked now offered polite nods. Tyler tried again later with subtler tactics, asking to borrow the bike for a date, flattering me in the hallway, and pushing boundaries. I filed a formal complaint. The HOA fined him and restricted neighborhood privileges, and he launched a brief social media campaign, painting himself as persecuted. The internet clout was loud, but community consequence had teeth. The turning point was an unexpected act of courage. One of his friends, a girl who'd grown up around motorcycles, knocked on my door with a memory card. It held candid clips of Tyler admitting he'd been testing the block to see what he could get away with. The footage wasn't cinematic. It was ordinary and damning. With that evidence, the board escalated sanctions. More fines, mandatory counseling, and deeper community service followed. His mother faced neighbors who were tired of drama. The neighborhood adopted clearer rules about trespass and private property disputes. No one wanted long public spectacles. They wanted boundaries that worked. There were awkward moments. I crossed paths with Tyler at a winter walk, and he crossed the street. Once he mouthed what looked like sorry. I accepted it. He needed something besides humiliation. He needed to learn how respect works, and apologies alone don't teach that lesson. Officer Daniels told me later that police reports can serve like an anchor. "We don't always make law," he said, "but we write what's seen." Courts like paper trails. Neighbors played a role. Mrs. Alvarez from 2 doors down had seen him on the bike and wrote a short witness statement. Mr. Lee, a retired teacher, kept a dated note with times and observations. They didn't want a headline. They wanted fairness. Their willingness to put their names on a piece of paper was civic courage in a small-town way. I can tell you about the bike until it feels like a confession. It was my father's old toolbox that taught me patience, the dirt under my nails that tasted like work. I remember saving for parts, cutting corners to buy new pads, arguing with mechanics until I learned something. Riding taught me how to breathe when the world tried to make me small. That Harley is a ledger of time I can't reproduce. When Tyler first sat on it, he wasn't just testing chrome. He was testing whether the neighborhood would notice that some people can assume and others must prove. There is a cruelty in entitlement that isn't loud. It's the presumption that people with less will stay quiet. That presumption is a kind of theft in itself. The hearing felt like an odd civic drama. The boardroom smelled of coffee and printer toner. The president of the board tried to steer the meeting with neutral language. Tyler's mother sat at the end of the long table like a judge made of porcelain. She listed community standards as if they'd been broken by my presence. One board member voiced concern about precedent. If we didn't act, where would it stop? When it came time to vote, the board split, but not evenly. A close vote is a strange kind of validation. You don't feel absolved, but you feel seen. The reprimand spelled out expectations, community service hours, and the formal apology. The board archived the incident with a formal docket so future members would have context. Online, Tyler tried to make his own reality. He posted clips with music overlays, a grainy reenactment, captions like, "Biker tries to take my car," and "Neighborhood prejudice." He begged followers to spread the truth, whatever version fit his brand. The comments were a carousel of emotion. Some cheered him on, others smelled something off. Social media amplifies and flattens at once, but it also leaves footprints. His posts were public and messy. The memory card showed ordinary things. Tyler in a car bragging to friends. "Watch this. I'll see what he'll do. Dude has a bike, but let's see." Another clip caught him laughing. "My mom will back me up. She's on the board." Those words cut because they were casual, unguarded proof he never meant to share. People treat casual speech as filler, but it often contains the most honest parts. After that, the board didn't have to stretch inference into accusation. They acted. Fines increased, privileges were suspended, and mandatory community accountability sessions were scheduled. Tyler's mother, once formidable, took a quieter tone in the neighborhood group chats. She wrote a more measured email to the board acknowledging events she wouldn't fully admit in public. There were simple, practical moments that shaped me more than the drama. I spent afternoons in the garage, hands on the bike, checking bolts as if the machine was a living thing and I had to ensure its comfort. Oil changes are meditative. Each turn of the wrench quiets the part of you that wants to go viral with rage and instead asks for proof. Documentation is a discipline of the patient. Whenever Tyler tried to recast the story, the recorded footage would play like a tether. He tried to spin the narrative at community coffees, at school reunions, and over text, but the footage and the witnesses were stubborn. The board met twice more, and community service hours were logged. The HOA archived the incident so future board members would have context. Accountability, it turns out, prefers records. The son tried one last gambit. He attempted to use a neighbor's vague recollection of something else to muddy the waters, but Mr. Lee and Mrs. Alvarez had kept notes. People began to realize that civic life isn't just social media posts and charisma. It's the granular memory of names, dates, and small acts. The board tightened rules about trespass and clarified how to handle private property disputes. Months later, Tyler and I crossed paths on the sidewalk. He looked smaller without a live camera in his hand. He mumbled an apology that was part regret, part social calculation. I accepted it because I didn't want to be an altar for vengeance. I wanted closure. In the end, the neighborhood changed in subtle ways. The HOA updated its rules to include clearer penalties for trespass and guidelines for documenting disputes. The board voted to add a small clause about how to handle private property issues and to maintain records. Those policy tweaks won't make headlines, but they make living together possible. I ride the Harley for myself, not for anyone's approval. The engine has a familiar throb that steadies the day. When I roll past houses, I see faces softened by the ordinary business of life. Kids on bikes, someone mowing a lawn, two neighbors sharing a joke. The memory of the confrontation fades, replaced by the hum of routine. Some things are worth defending not because they're flashy, but because they anchor you. You defend them with records, with witnesses, with calm persistence. You defend them because sometimes the world hands you a moment that demands you show who you are. So if you see a man perched on a bike with a smirk, wondering who will stop him, remember, not every quiet neighbor is powerless. A title, a maintenance log, and a patient willingness to document the truth can be louder than 100 clips and 1,000 comments. In the end, humility and records do the work people brag about online, and that's the real kind of justice I'd recommend. Right.